Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Videocast. I'm Brent.
And I'm Maggie.
And we're glad to be with you again tonight. This is episode 3, Dealing with Differences. We don't have any differences.
We have a lot of differences.
You're going to hear about some of those tonight. What people have said for a long time is that opposites attract. And for us, that would certainly be true until they don't, right? So over time, sometimes maybe those things that you found to be cute or attractive about your spouse that was so different initially, maybe not so cute after all.
Yep, we see this like in our culture in Disney movies. Usually the princess she falls in love with the guy from the slums.
Hey, that's our life too.
Not true. I'm not a princess. I'm a warrior. Or like in the Hallmark movies, the person in the businessman, in the city, they end up going out to the country, to the horse farm. They meet someone that they fall in love with the farmer. So opposites attract. Sometimes we see that in our culture.
Maybe that's your story too. Maybe you did marry somebody because of all the ways they were different from you. But scientifically, here's what's interesting. We've discovered through scientific studies, research, those kind of things, that actually it's not what makes us different that attracts us to the person. By and large, what makes you find a spouse, a long-term partner in marriage, is somebody that actually has a lot of things that are similar to you. The most long-lasting relationships find those bonds based on commonality. But what attracts us is seeing the characteristics and attributes that we actually value the most in that other person.
That's right. So when we think about our own story, what first attracted us, obviously, were the things that we had in common. So we both love Jesus. We both had pulses. That was an important one. We both like to laugh. And we both are very sensitive, emotional people. And so at first, those things were really shiny and, a little bit glamorous. And they definitely seemed more shiny than our differences. But then we were married for about a year. I think it was at least a year in before all of a sudden those differences started glaring back at us. So
my turn?
Yeah.
Okay. We also noticed that some of the differences seem to pale in comparisons to that gushy, googly-eyed feeling that we had at first. It seemed good to try and find ways to learn from each other. We noticed at times the other person's perspective or outlook actually was worth considering and more valuable. So what we found is that we were attracted to the things that we had in common, but we found the longer that we've been together, there's a lot of differences, and there's actually a lot of things to be celebrated, to learn from, to grow from through that. So we're going to talk to you tonight about some of the ways we are learning to do that. Still a work in progress there, I think.
That's right. After a while, your differences, again, they kind of start glaring at you. They act a little bit like toddlers. So at first, I don't know if you have a toddler.
Are you saying I act like a toddler?
No, our differences act like toddlers. So if you have a toddler at your house, they're a little bit pesky. Like at first, they just sort of tug at your shirt sleeve. They want you to pay attention to them. And then before you know it, they're jumping on your lap. And then before you know it, they're like full on in your face, slobbering all over you, glaring at you. And so that's kind of how differences creep up on us.
It also sounds a lot like our dog.
This is true.
Yeah. So we thought it'd be funny to share with you as we just kind of dive in here tonight, some differences we've discovered over the years. I love the graphic that the team put together kind of promoting this podcast. You see the guy there with the awesome beard and the briefcase. That's kind of me in my life. And then you see the hippie next to her pretty great graphic image of Maggie as well. So just even in that image, we can see the differences that we have together. Now, some of these really don't impact us very much. Some of these differences we're going to share. They're just kind of things that we laugh about, things that we've learned to appreciate about each other along the way. We can navigate through some of these differences pretty easily. So I'll start. I grew up in the North.
And I'm from the South, y'all. I love salad.
I like the idea of salad.
I prefer like movies that make you cry.
And I prefer action movies where lots of people die.
I prefer cake, like really chocolatey chocolate cake.
And I prefer pie, like a really good fruit pie. But I'll eat pretty much anything with sugar.
I enjoyed when my kids were little baby infants and they slept all the time. They looked like angels.
Until they start crawling in your lap and slobbering in your face?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I did not enjoy the infant stage for lots of reasons. I didn't iron until after we were married.
And now I don't iron now that we're married.
It's true. I love spicy food.
I prefer not eating things that cause pain.
I don't know why I do either, but it just tastes so good. Yeah.
I like to dress down. I much prefer stretchy pants. I think the whole world should go to only stretchy pants.
And I like to dress up. So I don't prefer pants I don't mind any kind of pants. Yeah, I actually prefer them in most settings.
So these are some ways that we realize that we're different. They haven't really created much conflict though, but there are some differences we've found that have created a lot of conflict, and we've had to sit down, hash them out. Sometimes we've had yelling. It feels like yelling matches over some of these differences. So
they don't just feel like yelling matches, like they were. We actually got verbal
loud,
arguments about some of these things. These are real life examples. So not just the list we just shared, but the ones we're about to share. Each of these ones we're about to share with you have been a source of conflict for us at some point in time in our married lives.
So I've tried desperately to be organized.
And I kind of have my own version of what organization looks like.
It doesn't really look organized at all.
I can find it. Yeah. I like to go on a walk, and when I'm walking somewhere, I walk like I'm on a mission.
And when I'm going somewhere, I lollygag because there is so much to see.
We've done a lot of family walks during this quarantine time, and I think I'm always creating tension because she's not going fast enough and I'm not going slow enough and paying attention. So that's one that we are constantly working through. I'm really good with directions.
And true story, I have actually gotten lost in our neighborhood.
It's a circle with one entrance and exit.
That's how I knew I got lost because, or actually that's how I knew where to go, because I saw my house again. Like I left my house and then I saw my house again.
We can never move out of somewhere that's not a circle. Yeah, just so Maggie can get home. Yep. I like to talk at night.
And I don't think any serious conversations should be had after 10 p.m.
You know, I saw a meme this week that said this, the world is basically made up of two kinds of people. The ones that say that 10 p.m. is pretty early, and those that say 10 p.m. is pretty late. And those two people wind up marrying each other. So that's definitely our story.
Happened. Yeah, yep. That happened to us. Okay, so, I love talking to strangers. I want to know people's stories. I want to know like all their hopes and dreams.
And we tell our kids not to talk to strangers. I just lost my place. So I don't understand why I need to talk to strangers.
I prefer to dress down. Even this has caused conflict, even at weddings, like when we got into a wedding or to like a really nice dinner or reception. I'm embarrassed to say I've been known to wear crummy clothes.
Yep.
And not my best clothes. I'm learning.
Not crummy clothes, but like, you know.
Like stretchy pants clothes.
Yeah. And I don't mind dressing up nicely for events, and actually kind of like doing that from time to time. I obey the letter of the law.
And I obey the spirit of the law.
Which is not the law at all. Yeah, no.
I like name brand ice cream. I think that if you're going to get ice cream, it should definitely not be generic.
We've actually gotten conflict about me buying generic brand vanilla wafers and generic brand Oreos, generic brand ice cream, because I used to think they tasted all the same. Now I've seen the error of my ways, and a thing like Bluebell has really opened my eyes to that reality.
You know what's really crazy though? I just went to Walmart yesterday and I got ice cream and I picked generic. Maybe we're switching. We're becoming different people. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So when we look through a list like this, sometimes we can become disillusioned and wonder what I was thinking when I agreed to marry this person. All right. I'm not thinking that today, but there are times when our differences become so overwhelming to us that we start wondering, what have I done? Like, is this person even who I thought I was marrying? Do we even have anything in common? How can I convince this person? Sometimes this goes to our minds, right? How can I convince them that their ideas are so wrong? Help them to see that mine are so right? How can I help this person see the error of their ways? How can I bring them over to my kingdom? We talked about that some last week. That's where we get into trouble, right? We have this world that we're building where what we want done is happening, where we want to be able to make decisions and live the way that we want to live. And when we marry somebody, sometimes that kingdom gets infringed upon and we get into trouble with that. We have our individual kingdoms and we bring those into married life. Our differences are a part of those kingdoms. And they don't just go away, those differences, because we said I do. It's a process of bringing those kingdoms together, kingdom of Brent, kingdom of Maggie, together to do what's good for our marriage kingdom and ultimately for God's kingdom together as a couple.
Yeah, we want to unpack this kingdom theme a little bit for you guys. So there's a guy we follow named Dallas Willard. He's a Jesus follower and a philosopher. He's in heaven now, but he describes our individual kingdom as simply our sphere of influence. So it's where whatever I want done is done. That's my kingdom. It's what I can do or control either directly or indirectly. So for instance, I have a writing desk in my house, and that is my kingdom. Many times my children have tried to take over my desk, and they get all of my papers out and they find new pencils and new things in there. And I have to go reclaim my kingdom and say, no, this is mommy's desk, and you have all the rest of the house to destroy. Or say my body is my kingdom. So as believers and as Christ followers, our journey in life is simply to bring our kingdom into God's kingdom. Now, God's kingdom for believers is our centering point. So we become one as we come under the kingdom of God together. And that's how we can learn to live in peace with each other and grow in like mutual respect for each other, because we're no longer competing over our differences, whose idea is better or whose way of doing stuff is best, but we're actually begin to collaborate together and work together with God and his kingdom. And we just learn to enjoy each other and enjoy God and enjoy the work that we have to do together in his kingdom.
So how can we appreciate these unique giftings in that way and the diverse way we're wired as a positive force in our relationship? Again, I believe that the differences that we have shouldn't just divide us, but are actually ways that we can be united together. Differences don't have to divide us. Often they do, because we allow those priorities to be so important to us that we let that get in the way of our relationship. We can't let it divide us, but instead it must unite us. That can make life more diverse and interesting. Our differences can actually do that. But differences do often divide us. So how do we keep them from dividing us and instead let them unite us? The way that we do that is through love.
Yeah, so let's take a little bit to talk about what love is. So we want to recognize that love, as much as it's presented to us in culture as a gushy feeling or a really great emotion, it's actually not a feeling or an emotion. Love is a verb. It's an action verb. And it's a daily choice. And sometimes, honestly, an hourly or a minute by minute choice to will the good of others. So I might say, like today, I might say, I love chocolate cake. Or right now I'm in like a cookie butter fix. So if you don't know what cookie butter is, it's probably better off. Your waistline is thanking you, but.
And the name brands are better at that. We discovered that.
Biscoff cookie butter is the way to go.
Yep.
Now I might say that I really love cookie butter, but the truth is I'm just really fond of it because I'm not willing cookie butter's good. So if we want to love something, we actually, as Dallas Willard says, we love something or someone when we promote its good for its own sake.
And that's really what Jesus was all about. His whole life and mission and ministry, and what we see throughout the Gospels, the account of Jesus's life was that of love. He was the master of it. And as we've learned through the scriptures, Jesus had to deal with people that were all very, very different from himself, radically different. I don't think anybody's ever walked planet Earth with more differences than the rest of humanity than Jesus himself. So Jesus was a master of dealing with those people and their differences in love. Philippians 2 gives us this great picture of that, really how Christ-like love should be what motivates us as Christians. We're going to look at a couple of verses there to look at how we can put that into practice. It's really our first two steps of how do we deal with differences comes from this text and loving each other in a Christ-like way. So Maggie, why don't you share the first verse of that, Philippians 2, verse 3.
Yeah, so it says, do nothing, no thing from selfish ambition or conceit. And I looked up another translation today. It says, when you do things, don't let selfishness or pride be your guide. So the first step in loving our spouse through differences is we actually have to slay our pride. So how do we practically slay pride in our lives? Well, I have some firsthand experience because as it turns out, I really struggle with pride. And so
I do too, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can really butt heads big time. But been doing this practice for a little while. we don't, the thing about pride, the tricky thing about pride is that we don't usually know that we have it because we're so prideful that we don't think we are. We think we're doing pretty good. And so we don't even know the extent that our pride is wounding our relationships with each other and with our family and with our friends, our coworkers. So when our spouse, hopefully gently, points out to us something that we have been doing that's really frustrating to them, or this just we're stuck in a place and we can't seem to get out, when our spouse points those things out, which are called our blind spots, if we're constantly arguing in our head, even quietly, like, I don't think it's that bad, or I don't really think that's right, then chances are we could be experiencing pride. And so we'll talk about what do we do with that.
Yeah, so to remove pride, one of the practical first steps you can take, you just have to be willing to take a good look inside what's going on, what you're being motivated by, what your motivations are, why you're doing the things that you're doing. Am I doing these things or acting this way because I always want to be right? Oftentimes it's the case for me, or I always think my way is better. Or am I willing to be replacing that pride and ask this question, do I genuinely care about this person and want to promote their good for their own sake? Not for my own well-being, but for their own well-being. Am I willing to consider genuinely caring about them, genuinely loving them for their own well-being?
Yeah. So if we find pride in us, or if our spouse says, "Hey, there's a pride in there," then we just need to confess it. And confess just means tell the truth. So we tell the truth. I'm prideful, or I'm struggling with pride. And then we want to begin learning how to humble ourselves. And the good news is, if you're a follower of Jesus, you don't have to try to figure that out on your own, because Jesus is the most humble being, and he will work with you if you ask the Holy Spirit for help to show us how can we humble ourselves.
So one of the definitions for pride that we say at Life Action is this: pride is doing what I want to do, when I want to do it, thinking about myself more than God and others. So if that's kind of your motivation, that's probably a sign in some area of your life that there may be pride there. You're not thinking and valuing somebody else above yourself. You're thinking about yourself too often and what you want to have happen when you want it to happen. That's a sign of pride in your life. So again, we have to remove pride. That's the first step of dealing with these differences. Second one is like it. And there's a second point in this verse of Philippians 2:3 that will lead us to that second point. The second point of Philippians 2:3 says this: it's not just do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but rather in humility count others more significant than yourselves. This was huge in the life of Jesus. We see that all throughout Scripture, this idea of humility being a priority. We have to replace, then step two is it's not just the step of removing pride. Step two is actually replacing that pride with a humble mindset. And that's so hard for us. It's hard to do this. Pride comes naturally. Love does not come naturally. Love takes work and effort and energy. Humility is the same way. You cannot be proud and loving at the same time. Love is characterized so often with humility. So we have to remember, again, we walk around life with one lens on, one pair of glasses on that looks at the world in the way that we see that. Humility instead takes that lens off, okay, and it's willing to put on the lens of somebody else. How is what I'm doing, how is what I'm saying, how is what I'm thinking actually going to affect this other person, not just what's going to be best for me?
Yes, and humility isn't beating yourself up or becoming like a doormat. It's not thinking less of yourself, but it's just simply thinking of yourself less, which brings us to the next part of the verse that we want to talk about. And that is Philippians 2:4 says, "Let each of you look not only to their own interests, but also to the interests of others."
So this idea of humility, if pride is doing what I want to do, when I want to do it, thinking more about God and others, here's the definition we share at Life Action for humility. It's not thinking less of myself, but thinking about God and others more often. It's not tearing yourself down and thinking that you're a terrible failure or you have nothing to contribute. That's actually still a proud mindset because you're thinking about yourself too often. It's thinking about God and others more often. As we see in this verse, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about ourselves, but it really means that as we think about ourselves, we should be thinking about other people in the same way and even more often than that. But in addition to this concern for self, And more often, we need to think about the needs of others and those around us. We need to also be thinking about God and his kingdom. When we take the focus off of ourselves, even off of our marriage, and turn it back to God, it's much easier to walk in humility and to be able to live these things out. It's also easier when we're focusing on God and others to be more concerned about our spouse, to put Christ-like love into action, to pay attention to their needs, their wants, their desires, and join our kingdom together in spite of those differences that we have.
That's right. I was actually talking to a friend today, and she told me that, and she's a young mom and she has two little kids. So when they go to bed at night, like she usually just scrambles around the house like a mad lady. She's trying to put everything back together again so that she can feel like tomorrow she'll have a little bit more peace. And so she was telling me today that she usually does that. But last night she said, like 8 o'clock, I decided I'm not going to clean the house anymore. I'm going to sit down. And she said, my husband was watching a YouTube about woodworking. And that's the difference they have. She's not really interested in woodworking, but out of love, and just being interested in something he's interested in, she sat down next to him and they just watched a YouTube together about woodworking. And she was like surprised at the joy that she found and the filling of her own tank when she said, I decided to put aside the stuff that I wanted to get done, and I just enjoyed my spouse and the things that he's interested in.
Yeah, that just reminded me. Maggie and I are very different. I've got an accounting brain. Maggie's a writer, free spirit. So our ways that we're ministered to by teachers and by influencers is very different. And I remember there's been people that Maggie's followed over the years that have influenced her and her thinking about Jesus and her life. And there's been times where she's introduced me to these speakers, and I initially want to be so opposed to it. But the more I listen to them, the more I actually have appreciated them and benefited and grown because of their influence. So we have to take time to express interest in the things that interest others.
That's right. Okay, I think it's our last point. We want to, because of our differences and because of our default is to just assume the worst about our spouse, we want to begin believing the best. Step 3, believe the best about your spouse.
Which is really easy.
Is it?
No, not for me.
Yeah. So, because again, our default is to assume the worst. So if we don't want our differences to divide us, we have to actually constantly work at believing the best about our spouse. Our spouse, hopefully, if you have a healthy relationship, is not out to hurt you. You know, they're not out to destroy you. Your spouse is genuinely a good, beautiful, amazing human. In fact, that's why you were actually attracted to them to begin with, because you saw these really good qualities in them. And so as we go along and the differences start glaring at us, what we have to do is we have to remember again, believe the best about them, stop assuming the worst, and just remember, okay, what was it that I actually liked about this person to begin with? What qualities did I admire? And you go looking for them again. And sometimes you have to write them down because you forget, or the differences or the annoying things are so big that you want the good things to show up again. So speak them out loud, you know, to yourself or to your spouse.
Yeah, Proverbs 5:18. I love this picture from God's word. It says this: let your fountain be blessed and take pleasure in the wife of your youth. Now, that's not just a picture for husbands. That's married couples together. Wives, you can take pleasure in the husband of your youth too. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to change over time, right? I certainly look a lot different. I would say a lot less attractive than I did when we first got married. But the reality here is that over time, it can be hard, right, to stay positive when the busyness and the crud of life begins to happen, when that conflict arises, when those differences feel like they're just over in your face all the time. One thing you can go do, as Maggie shared a minute ago, is just go back and make a list. Take some time to observe your spouse and only write down, only observe, only remember the things that you see that are good.
That's right. If you find yourself stuck right now, a really good daily practice is find one thing, one quality about your spouse, or one thing that they did for the family or for you or they're doing, and just speak out loud to them, thank you. You know, thank you for the way that you show up every day and go to work, or thank you for helping with the dishes, or thank you for noticing this kid and stepping in with discipline. Thank you for just being an honest person. Thank you for being hardworking. And so we want to begin a daily practice of thankfulness, and that helps.
Megan and I have actually exercised this, and we challenge this to people on the road. And it's been amazing when we had to work on this list to be able to do this and share a message like this on a road when we're traveling and out speaking in places. It's really helped us to actually be able to live these things out pretty well. So we want to share with you just a few of the things, kind of tied back to some of those differences we shared earlier that we've learned to really appreciate and thank each other for.
So we'll do our list in front of you so you can have an example. So thank you, Brent, for being the funniest guy I know. I think that you are even funnier than Jimmy Fallon.
That's a pretty
Jimmy Fallon is pretty funny.
Compliment, yeah. Well, I love that no one makes you laugh like you do, that you never take yourself seriously. We joke all the time that nobody cracks Maggie up like she does.
It's true. I'm probably the funniest person I know, but you're the funniest guy I know.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks. I'll take it.
But I'm working on humility.
All right, let's keep going.
I appreciate that you're good with numbers and you patiently remind me how old I am and like what year this is and when our children were born and all those things I've asked you like 100 times.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you're never afraid to ask for my help with things like directions or dates or what year this is or opening pickle jars, no matter how many times you've asked before.
Well, thank you for helping me see also the importance of processing life out loud and being so patient with me for all the times it's been hard for me to get my words out.
Well, thank you for teaching me that there are times where saying nothing is not just okay, but actually the smartest thing that I can do.
Thank you for all the Saturday morning pancake breakfast that you make for us.
Well, thank you for teaching me how to make pancakes and other breakfasts and putting up with my basic lack of life skills.
Thanks for spending time with our kids, reading books, sitting down and playing board games. That's huge. Legos, wrestling.
Well, thanks for putting up with the fact that I'm really just a big kid and you're trying to raise 5 of us right now.
Thank you for amazing back rubs.
Well, thanks for making all those amazing back rubs pay off.
Awkward.
Awkward, absolutely. So again, there's just some examples for you. I think if you just daily begin practicing one thing a day to be thankful for, to remind yourself something that you were initially attracted to or something that you're seeing in their life now that can help you deal with those differences when they come up and the problems arise. Again, a key to all of this, Ephesians 4:2 says this, with all humility, and again, you can't do this without the Holy Spirit's help in finding ways to be humble, and gentleness with patience. So humbleness, gentleness, and patience bear with one another in love.
Yes. Another way to practice this, actually, we have 2 tools to help you because sometimes you just need like a boost and you need a reminder. So there's 2 challenges we have. And we found there's one called the 30-day spouse encouragement challenge. And there's another one called just the 30-day encouragement challenge. And we'll stick those, someone will stick those for you in the links.
Yeah, there's
below.
one for husbands, one for wives. You can find the links for that in the comments below.
Yep.
Tell the story about how that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this winter on our winter break, when we were home from traveling, Brent and I were having a ton of conflict again. And
it happens.
Yeah. And I think I started noticing, well, there were some things going on that I didn't realize I was doing. And so I just needed help. And so I called my friend who's like a counselor and I was like, can you like counsel me, give me some counseling? So she's so sweet. She always says yes. And so I went to coffee with her and I'm talking about marriage stuff and getting all my crud out, my junk. And she gave me some homework and she really helped me a lot. But she said, Maggie, I think one thing that will really help you guys is if you just start, one thing you can begin doing is just begin to affirm Brent, just call him out on the good things that he's doing and thank him. So it's kind of funny. When I got home, I walked into the door and apparently I was a little zealous, would you say? And I must have just started affirming him like crazy right away. And Brent I remember you were standing at the kitchen counter and he
felt good at first and then it just got really awkward.
He just looked at me and he goes, I know what she told you to do. I was like, what? He was like, she told you to affirm me, didn't she? I'm like, how did you know? And he was like, it's kind of obvious. You should probably tone it down like a little bit because that's really obvious.
When Maggie goes for something, she goes like all out, and that's exactly what happened. So, yeah.
Hopefully I haven't toned it down too much.
You haven't. You've done a great job. Yeah, I feel very affirmed.
I affirm you for affirming me.
Great. All right. So remember that you're not going to completely change your spouse into becoming just like you. The key to dealing with differences is not to convert your spouse to believe or to think or to become the same kind of person you are. You also are not going to become completely like your spouse. Embrace those differences. They're okay. Some of the differences that you have will last your entire lifetime because it's how God uniquely wired and created you. The environment that you grew up in and were shaped by can help you actually influence the world in some powerful ways. Celebrate and embrace those differences. Again, it's an amazing way that God has made you to connect with him and help others connect with him too around the world. Embrace those things that make you different. Celebrate them, benefit from them, grow together through them. Don't let them be a cause of division, but keep putting on God's love through humility and through patience and gentleness. Keep putting that love into action. All right, that's all we have for tonight. There is no video hangout afterwards tonight, but if you've got questions or need some encouragement, some counsel, or just someone to pray with, you want to be connected to, you can connect with us on Facebook. You'll see our names pop up in the comments there. You can just search for Brent or Maggie Paulus and you'll find us there. Find our names in the comments below and send us a message. Just tell us, hey, we have some things we'd like to talk with about you individually or collectively as a couple. We'd love to come alongside you and your spouse on this journey together.
Yes, we've had so much fun doing this with you guys. Thanks for showing up. And I don't know if it's helped very much you guys, but it's helped us a ton. So we've had to actually live this stuff out before we speak it and then after we speak it. And we were saying tonight, we're like, man, we haven't gotten in a fight in like a week. So it's probably coming tomorrow, but it's definitely helped us out. And so
last week we couldn't have said that.
That's true. Like 30 minutes before the talk, we couldn't have said that. But we do want you guys to know that we're not going to be on here next week, but there's some different speakers coming. So stay tuned because over the next couple Wednesdays, at least, we're going to have some different people on here.
Yeah, Life Action is going to keep these Let's Talk conversations going the next several weeks. Different speakers, different topics. You'll want to tune into that. Next week, make sure you tune in for sure. Our friends John and Donna Avant are going to share some things they're learning during this time on how they're learning to lead their children and grandchildren through fears and some ways that we can do the same for our families. We know we've got a lot to learn from that, so we're excited to hear from them next week. Good to be with you all. Have a good night. We'll see you.
Bless you.